What's good, the peoples? Oh, I've got Blockman on the screen. What's happening here? Hold on, I can fix that. Get rid of Blockman. Put my stupid face on the screen. There I am. And then we put the game back up. The game is gone. It vanished. The game is about finding the game, I guess. There we go. All right. I am freshly showered. Everything feels good. I didn't get around to doing my dishes yet, but whatever. Oh, wow. Yeah, the green screen does a number on this bottle, doesn't it? Fair enough. You guys have no idea what I'm drinking today. All right. I need to settle in for another, I don't know, 86 hours of Demon Bluff. Does that sound good to anybody? So I was doing an endless run. I did 17 villages in an endless run. I don't know that the difficulties actually increased, though. Like, it feels about the same to me. I don't actually know. Didn't add any new characters or anything. So I've got an 8-card village. I've got 1 outcast. No, I'm going to have 2 outcasts, and then we got an extra one. No, we don't have Bob, we got Lilith. I unlocked a second Lilith skin, but I don't like it as much. I don't like this Lilith as much as this one. This one looks like mischievous and angry, and this one looks like too gleeful. I don't know. This one's better. Alright, so I've got 2 outcasts I'm looking for. The Chancellor's going to be sitting next to one of them. I've got Lilith. I've got a drunk. We got a doppelganger. Hopefully we don't see the drunk. Lover says there's one adjacent to her. Closest evil counterclockwise. That's going back to the... Who's on the other side of the lever here? A scout. Lilith is 1 card away. So you're saying the 2 evils are either together or we've got a wretch somewhere. Well, we're going to lose somebody here. Number 4 is dead. I got a second scout. Could be a doppelganger pair. Could be the Chancellor next to a wretch. The wretch cannot be disguised at, so this is one of my yellows, and then I've got another yellow. So we've got either a drunk or a doppelganger. So the scout could be a doppelganger pair. You're saying Lilith is next to the closest evil. You're saying Lilith is 2 cards away from the closest evil. Do I have a source of corruption? Yeah, I have a potential drunk. So this could be a doppelganger pair. A real scout and a real doppelganger. In which case we know the doppelganger is telling the truth. It could be... It occurs to me there's no reason you can't have an evil doppelganger. Disguises as a good villager, but you could have an evil doppelganger. There's no reason you can't. I don't think I've seen one, but... Okay. This could be a minion drunk pair, because the drunk requires a not-in-play card. If one of these is the Chancellor, like this is the Chancellor next to this wretch, this could be a drunk, because the scout would then not be in play. This could also be a minion scout pair. So this could be a Chancellor next to this wretch, and this could be a real scout. Or it could be a minion demon pair. Ooh, I've got a second pair of Enlightens I just saw. You're pointing one way and you're pointing the other way. You're pointing away from each other. That's interesting. So I could have like minion drunk, but then I would have to have a doppelganger pair. I can't... The minion would have to be involved in any pair. Lilith can't be... Lilith is a demon, so she has to be a unique villager. So for Lilith to be in one of the pairs, the minion also has to be in a pair. Because then the scout would be a unique villager, because this would not be a real scout, or this enlightened, the same logic works. So one of my pairs is a doppelganger pair, for sure. And then I don't know what this was. This could be anything. The wretch is always real. Wretch cannot be disguised as. So we always know this is a wretch. Okay. In the case of a doppelganger pair, I think we can trust both of them. Because the doppelganger has to be paired off of a good villager. Now, the good villager could be corrupt, but the only source of corruption we have is the drunk. But we don't have a drunk, we've got a doppelganger. There's no drunk on this table. Because we have the doppelganger for sure. We've got a pair, we've got a pair. We've got two ways to make a pair. One with a minion, one with a doppelganger. Okay. You cannot be the doppelganger. If you are the doppelganger... Well, I guess the Chancellor could be next to the Wretch. The Chancellor doesn't have to be next to the doppelganger. The Chancellor could be next to the Wretch. Okay, that's cool. All right, well, since I know I don't have a drunk, this knight is safe to test. So the knight's real. Good to know. You're saying there's one evil adjacent to you, and you guys are pointing the opposite direction. If we find someone here in a lie, we know that that's the minion pair. Either minion Lilith or minion villager. And then the other is the doppelganger pair. I feel like this must be a truth. Let's assume these are lies. Right? Excuse me, I'm allergic to lies. So this wretch is pinging as evil to these enlightened, but the wretch is also very far away. You're saying the closest evil is counterclockwise. You're saying that there's an evil up here. You're saying the closest evil is down here. If you're both telling the truth, you can't be evil. Because if you were evil, and you're telling the truth, that works. But then this doesn't. Because this would... The closest evil can be to you is here. And if you're evil, then you would say equidistant, because you'd have an evil here and an evil here. This can't be evil, because it was killed by Lilith. So if you're both telling the truth, you're not evil. And if you're both telling the truth, that means you're telling the truth, and you've got one evil adjacent to you, which means you must be evil. Which means this is the doppelganger pair, this is a scout and a minion, or a minion and Lilith. Where can the Chancellor be? The Chancellor can't be next to this scout. Or no, this wretch, rather. Oh yeah, you could. You could be here. The Chancellor could be here, next to this wretch. If this scout is the doppelganger... Well, this scout cannot be the doppelganger. Why do I say that? Well, because the Chancellor has to be next to the outcast that it adds to the table. If this is the doppelganger, where does the Chancellor go? The Chancellor can't sit next to him here, and he can't sit next to him here. And we know the Chancellor is not sitting next to the wretch on this side. You can't be a doppelganger. And if you can't be a doppelganger, this can't be the doppelganger pair. And if this can't be the doppelganger pair, then this is the doppelganger pair. And if this is the doppelganger pair, both of you are telling the truth. So, you're saying closest evil is counterclockwise. We know you're the doppelganger pair. Let me run through that again. You can't be the doppelganger. Why? If you're the doppelganger, where does the Chancellor sit? The Chancellor can't sit here because this person's dead. The Chancellor can't sit next to the wretch on the other side because that's a confirmed knight. So the Chancellor can't exist if you're the doppelganger, and we know the Chancellor must exist. If you're not the doppelganger... Ooh, hold on. Could you be the doppelganger? You could be the doppelganger. Let me think about this. You can't be the doppelganger, but you could, and then this could be the doppelganger pair. And if this is the doppelganger pair, then you're both telling the truth. If this is the doppelganger pair, the Chancellor must sit here. And the Chancellor is 2 cards away from the closest evil, which means Lilith must sit here. But Lilith is 1 card away from the closest evil, and that doesn't work. If this is the doppelganger pair, they must both be telling the truth, because there's no sources of corruption. So if this is a doppelganger pair, you're saying the doppelganger can't be here, it must be here, which means the Chancellor must be sitting next to the doppelganger. Why? Because if this is a doppelganger pair, you're an outcast. The Chancellor has to sit next to an outcast. If this is a doppelganger pair, this can't be the Chancellor, because it must be a real scout. And you can't sit next to the wretch on the other side, because that's a confirmed knight, and the only other place to sit is here. You're the Chancellor, and then by the bottom scout, that means the Chancellor's 2 cards away from the closest evil. Well, this wretch is 3 cards away. So 2 cards away would be the knight, again confirmed. 2 cards away the other direction is this enlightened. So this enlightened would have to be Lilith. But then the doppelganger is saying Lilith is 1 card away from the closest evil, and that just doesn't work. This can't be the doppelganger pair. I've ruled it out from both directions. And if you're not the doppelganger pair, you are. And if you're the doppelganger pair, you're both telling the truth. Now let's see how that shakes out. You're saying closest evil is counterclockwise. You're saying closest evil is clockwise. We've already ruled out this lover. If this lover is evil, you're telling the truth, but then you're lying. And you can't be lying because you're in a doppelganger pair. So you can't be evil. You've got to be telling the truth. And you're saying there's 1 evil adjacent to you, and that would be this scout. There's Lilith. So you're telling the truth in this direction. Well, okay, where does the Chancellor go now? The Chancellor's got to sit next to an outcast. We know one of you is the doppelganger. The Chancellor can't sit here because that's a confirmed lover. The Chancellor can't sit here because that's a dead villager. And the Chancellor can't sit here because that's a confirmed enlightened and doppelganger pair. That only leaves this scout sitting next to the wretch, who I'm going to kill right now. Whew. So the way this game mode works is we just, instead of like ascending and resetting our score every few villages, we just keep racking up score until we lose. So we just, it's kind of like how far can you go in the streak? Alright, I've got Lilith and a minion. I've got to find both. I've got 2 outcasts, Wretched, Bombardier, and Plague Doctor. So I've got a source of corruption if the Plague Doctor is in the board. There's a bishop. Between 4, 5, and 7, there's minion, outcast, and villager. I better flip those and see what they are. 4. 5 is an outcast. And now we're going to lose someone. Alright, you're saying you're 1 card away from a corrupted character. That can only be the case if we've got a Plague Doctor. Let's flip the rest of these. There's a wretch. You're a real wretch. And the Confessor's dizzy. So, we can't have a this has to have been a dead Bombardier. We can't have a Plague Doctor. The only way we could have another outcast on the board is if this is a dead Bombardier, because minions can disguise as a copy of a random villager or outcast in town. I don't think the minion can just roll up one of these, and then this could be like a dead Plague Doctor who really got a shot off. I don't think that can happen. Okay, so you're saying 4, 5, and 7. There's a minion, outcast, and villager. Possible, because if the way I'm thinking of it is if we don't have a plague doctor, that bard's got to be lying. And that accounts for villager as the judge, minion is the bard, bombardier is the outcast. And it would make you a truth teller. And then you would just be Lilith. I think you can always test a judge properly by sending him after a confessor, because the confessor cannot lie. Let's see if you're lying. 9 is saying truth. Confessors always tell the truth, so you're confirmed. It's not looking good for this bard. It's not looking good for this bard at all. It's looking like you're good, and then the bard is evil. And it would be the bard and the confessor in that case. Let's see if the jester counts 3 evils. Sure does. I mean, it looks pretty sewn up to me. We don't have a plague doctor. Nobody's corrupted. You're lying. And if nobody's corrupted, you're dizzy. And that's it. And you were... Learn how many evils are a knitter. So we had a dead knitter here. Okay. This is my 20th village in the streak. I've got 1 outcast to place. I've got a doppelganger. I've got a plague doctor to mix in. I've got Puka. And we got to kill 4 because I've got a puppeteer. You're saying you cured 1 corruption. So you're saying there's a plague doc. Oh, no, Puka's around too. Somebody's double claiming scout, or we've got a doppelganger pair. There's the knight, but it could be a corrupted knight, so I don't want to test it yet. Lover saying nobody nearby, so we've got a pair here. And a pair here. And I can make both of those minions and not have a doppelganger. But we don't have a plague doctor, and a plague doctor can't disguise. Oh my goodness, Prompto, why? Prompto's in the other room scratching his cage. I don't know why. He's not in his cage. Okay, there's no plague doctor on the board. Plague doctor didn't corrupt anyone. All corruptions are because of Puka. So if you're telling the truth, Puka is either here or here. Okay, I gotta go deal with Prompto real quick. I'll be right back. All right, where was I? I had deduced I don't have a plague doctor, so I must have a doppelganger as my outcast. So, we have a real doppelganger pair, but Puka is also afoot. So the villager half of my doppelganger pair could be lying if they're sitting next to Puka. You're saying minions one card away from the closest evil. That's pretty likely, considering there's 3 evil people on the board. You're saying the same thing about Puka. So you're also saying only one person is corrupted, maximum, because Puka is sitting next to an evil card. You're saying no evil adjacent to you. You're saying closest evil's up that way. So you're saying if you and the lover are on the up and up, you're saying the closest evil is there. For the left side to be more evil, we would need 3 evils on this side. So that architect seems less likely than not. You're saying scout, architect, enlightened. You're saying, is there any overlap here? Yeah, you're both pointing at 3. And I have no abilities, so I just got to suss it out from what I've got. Okay. If you're telling the truth, then everybody on this half of the board is telling the truth. Unless they're evil. But Puka couldn't be on this half of the board. The closest Puka could be would be here or here. We could have a minion, a puppet, and a puppeteer here, though. But if you're telling the truth, nobody here is corrupt. Do I think that's possible? I guess it's possible. Does taking a shot at the knight tell me anything? If the knight's evil, it tells me a lot. If the knight's good, it tells me almost nothing. Because if this knight is evil, then this lover and this enlightened are both lying. And then depending on what evil it is, will give us more. If this knight's evil, we get a lot of information. If this knight's good, we learn nothing. All we learn is that we have a confirmed knight. But nobody's even talking about this knight. Well, that's not true. The lover and the enlightened are talking about the knight. But it doesn't tell us anything about whether the lover or the enlightened are lying in that case. A confirmed knight would tell us that if this alchemist is telling the truth, Puka must be here. No, Puka could be here or here. Yeah, okay, Puka could be on the inside of the alchemist's circle, corrupt the people on either side, and then the alchemist would still only cure 1 corruption. Okay, that makes sense. So no, Puka's not as constrained as I thought. I think Puka is the hardest demon to deal with. Puka creates the most problems. The only action I could take to get any information is to take a shot at the knight. But if the knight is sitting next to Puka, we lose 9 hit points. And then we can't take another shot. Of course, we can't take another shot anyway. Like, if I shoot at somebody and they're dead, I'm down to 5 hit points, and then I can't shoot somebody else anyway. Like, so yeah, taking a shot at the knight... There's a 4 out of 9 chance that they're evil. But nobody's looking at the knight. You're looking at a scout and you're looking... Or no, yeah, you're looking at a... They're both looking at the architect. If this is the doppelganger pair, it's looking bad for this architect. And I don't like this architect anyway, because for this architect to be telling the truth, I'd have to have 3 evils on this side. What would that look like? Like a minion here. And then a puppeteer and a puppet, maybe. That would work. The puppeteer always has the puppet next to them. So yeah, there's lots of ways that could work, actually. This architect is not as constrained as I was thinking. But both of the empresses are talking about that architect. If this is if the empresses are a doppelganger pair, you're saying a scout or the architect. Well, if you're the doppelganger pair, this must be a minion pair. The minion or the puppeteer could be inside of the scout. Also, the puppet. I don't think I can just look at the puppet card, though, because I don't have a way to just check it. Okay. I'm going to have to start placing Puka around the board and just seeing how everything shakes out. Puka creates 2 liars, and then I've got 2 more liars to place after Puka's down. Can you be Puka? If you're Puka, that means you're lying, which means you've got an evil adjacent to you. Either here or here. There's so many cases to search through if I do it this way. And like you could be any kind of minion and I would never know because you're not saying anything. There's a 4 out of 9 chance that you're evil. That's a little bit less than a coin flip. If I were to take a shot at you. And if that's the case, I get so much information because I learn what you are. I confirm the lover and the enlightened as liars. This is rough without any abilities. Maybe this mode is harder than what we were playing yesterday. Maybe that's the case. Like, I can't really test for either of these to be the doppelganger pair. If you're the doppelganger pair, then yeah, Puka and the minion are just next to each other somewhere. You're both telling the truth. And then you're a minion pair, but your information is so spread out. If the scouts are the doppelganger pair, both of the empresses are implicating a scout, but they're implicating different scouts, and they're both implicating the same architect. And one of the empresses is implicating the other empress. Now this is interesting. If you're the minion pair and you're the minion, that means the scout is good because being the doppelganger pair, we would know that. The enlightened is good. The architect is good. This actually is a point in the favor of the architect being good because this is one of the cards that would need to be evil for the left side to be more evil. And this empress is implicating them. And the empress is also saying in that case that the scout is good, which we would know because the scout would be in a doppelganger pair, and the architect is good, which we would know because this one would be lying about the architect. If this is a minion, lots of information shakes out. If I kill you and you're not a minion, what do I know? Well, I know one of the people you're pointing to is evil. And I know you're lying. Ooh, taking a shot at this empress is starting to look good. If I shoot you and you're a minion, I get a lot. Because I know I can trust the scout, the architect, and that enlightened. No, I don't know that I can trust them because Puka's out there, but I know that they're good. And if you're a minion, I know I can trust this empress because the minion is pointing at you. If I shoot you and you're not a minion, if you're a good empress, then you're lying. And that tells me some information. If I shoot you and you're an empress, you have to be telling the truth. Obviously. Is that the case? Let me think on that. If I shoot you and you're an empress, you would have to be a minion or a doppelganger in that case. If you're a doppelganger, I know you're telling the truth. And you're saying that the scout, that's the minion in the scout pair. If you're a minion, everybody you're pointing to is good. Including the empress that I've killed. Is that all I get? Yeah, because if you're an empress, then you can't be lying if you're a doppelganger. Doppelgangers always tell the truth. And you must be lying if you're a minion. There's no wiggle room there. If I shoot you and you're a minion, I learn a whole lot. If I shoot you and you're the doppelganger, I know you're a truth-telling... Or I know you're an empress. I don't know if you're truth-telling. If I shoot you and you're the doppelganger, you could still be lying if this is Puka. Puka can only be this scout if this other card is a minion. Either the puppeteer or the actual minion. Does the logic hold for this other empress? Pretty much. I mean, it's the same logic. They're both pointing at an architect, they're both pointing at a scout, and you're either being pointed at or you're pointing at another empress. If I shoot you and you're a minion, I know for a fact this isn't Puka. Because these three characters would have to be good. And then I know all other evils have to be on this side. If I shoot you and you're a minion, and it would have to be the minion, because the puppeteer... Well, the puppeteer could put up... No, yeah, if you're a minion, you can't be evil. So the evil... And you're on the right side, so the three other evils would have to be over here, assuming this architect is telling the truth. Which I guess Puka could go here and you're lying, and the right side is more evil. So that doesn't hold. Never mind. We'll abandon that logic. If I shoot you and you're a minion, I think I learned less than if I shoot you and you're a minion. If I shoot you and you're evil, that gives me so much to work with. Okay. If you're telling the truth, you're not evil, you're not evil. If you're telling the truth, 2, 3, or 6 is evil. If you're telling the truth, this is worth thinking about. If you're telling the truth and you're good, the architect must be evil. Or the architect must be lying. If you're telling the truth, we've got good up here, and there's only 2 more spaces for evil to go. At best, both sides would be equally evil. This architect must be a liar. Which means the alchemist would be Puka. The alchemist would have to be Puka in that case. No, not necessarily. It could be another minion as well. It could be the minion. You're good. Even if both of you are evil, this architect is a liar. The only way this architect is a liar is if this alchemist is a liar. Because the only source of corruption we have is Puka. The architect can only be lying and good if they're sitting next to Puka. But if Puka's here, the architect would have gotten cured. The only way for this architect to be lying and good is if this alchemist is Puka. So if you're telling the truth, we've got good, good. We know the architect is lying. And Puka would have to be over here somewhere. You could be Puka. And then corrupting these two characters. Or you could be Puka, corrupting these two characters. That's all if you're the lover's telling the truth. I don't know if she is or not. I can take a shot at the knight to find out if she's halfway to telling the truth. Is there anything I can do to exonerate this empress? If you're telling the truth, good, good, you're lying. For sure. Because otherwise you'd be saying the closest evil is here, and that's across the board from you, my dude. If you're telling the truth, you're good, you're lying. But if you're telling the truth, we know that Puka's over here somewhere. Right? Because this architect needs to be lying, and this alchemist needs to be lying. I guess it could be puppeteer minion over here. Both lying because they're evil, and that would put the puppet on one of the two scouts. Can I prove that if the lover's telling the truth, the empress is a doppelganger pair? That's worth asking. That's a question worth asking. If you're telling the truth, we know that you're good and you're good. If you're good, that increases the chances as the doppelganger pair. Can you be good if both scouts are telling the truth? Let's check that first. We don't necessarily have to have two truth tellers in a doppelganger pair, because the villager in a doppelganger pair could be corrupted. But if both scouts are telling the truth, if the lover is telling the truth, and the logic holds, then I can disprove this next thesis. So, okay, lover. You're saying this empress is good, this knight is good. In this case, Puka would be... And in that case, Puka would have to be down here somewhere. Not necessarily. We said it could be a minion and a puppeteer. But what we want to know is if you're telling the truth, can both of them be telling the truth? Well, yeah, if it's minion puppeteer, you're telling the truth. And if it's minion puppeteer, or if it's minion puppeteer, then you're a puppet, which means you're telling the truth. You're evil, but you're telling the truth. So we're looking at minion, puppeteer, puppet. But then Puka has to be one card away from the closest evil, and the only other place for Puka to go is here. Which ruins the thesis, because now I don't have a doppelganger pair. Okay. So if you're telling the truth, and we've got good and we've got good, the architect is lying. So the architect is, we'll say the architect is evil. And the alchemist has to be lying. If the architect's lying, there's no way this alchemist secured only one corruption. Let me look at that. If you're lying, how could you have only cured one corruption? You could be Puka, I suppose, and you've cured this corruption and left this on the other side. Oh, that works, doesn't it? Yeah, because you're saying good and good. But you're lying in that case. You could be Puka. And Puka's corrupted you, and you cured that, and then you're lying. But then I've got a minion, a puppeteer, and a puppet to place. And where do they go? I've got to place 4 evils. If you're telling the truth, I've ruled out these 2 spots. And I've proven you're a liar. So 1 evil there. Say that's the minion. You're lying. So you're either evil or you're next to Puka. So like Puka, puppeteer, puppet would remove the scout pair. Puppeteer, puppet. No, because if you're evil, your ability didn't work. You would have to be. You can't be the puppet. Alchemist can't be the puppet because the alchemist is. The only way the alchemist can be a puppet is if he cured 0 corruptions. You can't cure corruption if you're corrupted or evil. Okay. So you can't be the puppet. I'm trying to find a logical thread that invalidates both of these from being the doppelganger pair if the lover's telling the truth. That's what I'm trying to do. But I just don't think I can get there. Oh, we've been on this village for a long time now. I've got slightly worse than a coin flip for the knight turn up evil, and that tells me that the lover and the enlightened are both lying. And depending on what evil it is, it tells me a lot more than that. Same thing with the empress. And the same thing with the scout. You can't be lying unless you're evil. If the alchemist is telling the truth. Minion here, Puka here, and you could be lying that way, and that's how you could be good. Or Puka here, corrupting this. There's just too much possibility space to go through. Can both of these scouts be lying? 1, 2, 3, 4. It can. Well, the puppeteer and the puppet are always next to each other. Let's say puppeteer and puppet are over here. For both of you to be lying, we would need to skip one in both directions. Puka, and then skip one and do a minion. So puppeteer and puppet. You're the minion. And then you're Puka. And then neither scout is corrupted, and both scouts are telling the truth. No, both scouts are lying in that case. So the way these scouts can tell the truth is if puppeteer, puppet. A minion here. Because Puka here would corrupt one of the two scouts in either direction. So a minion and minion here. And then Puka here. That's what happens if both of the, if this is a doppelganger pair, that's gotta be how it works. Could I do it some other way? Puppeteer, puppet. Puka corrupting both of them. And then a minion. Oh, I guess there are other ways to do it. But the minion still ends up in here. And there's still an evil amongst the empresses, and there's still an evil over here. This is tough. If I take a shot at the knight, and he's a real knight, I haven't lost anything. I'm in the same spot as I'm no worse off than I am now. But does it tell me anything? If you're a real knight, it tells me you're almost certainly lying. Not necessarily. Because I could have the real knight here, and a real scout here, and then evil here. How much is this enlightened like constraining me? Because right now you're saying the knight is evil, but the scout isn't. Or the lover is evil, but the scout and the alchemist aren't. So if the lover is evil and you're telling the truth, the scout and the alchemist are cleared, and I've got 3 more to place. I got 4 cards to put them down, though. If you're telling the truth and the knight is good, you're saying the lover is evil, and the scout and the alchemist are good. Or you're saying the empress is evil. No, you're not. You can't be. If you're telling the truth, the farthest away evil could be is 2 cards. If you're telling the truth and the knight and the lover are good, well, then this would be evil and the lover would be lying. But this could be Puka. Let's say this. So if you're telling the truth and this is Puka, that explains the lover's lie. But now Puka's here. Where can the rest of the evil go? We got 3 more to place. 1, 2, and 3. But now look, we're 2 cards away in the other direction. Which means if you're telling the truth, you should have said equidistant. For you to be telling the truth and to have any evil 2 cards away, you'd have to say equidistant and it'd be all 4 opposite you. Okay. So, if you're telling the truth, we know this empress. If you're telling the truth, it has to be the knight or the lover. And if we take a shot at the knight and he survives, we know it's the lover, assuming you're telling the truth. And if you're not telling the truth, well, if you're not telling the truth, it could be anybody in the opposite direction. I got like 70 of the 86 things done I needed to do. We figured out there's lots of ways for the alchemist to be telling the truth. It would require Puka to be somewhere here or here. If Puka's next to the alchemist, he gets corrupted. It would put Puka in the Knight, Enlightened, Empress, or Scout position, if he's telling the truth. There's a 1 out of 3 chance he's... Oh, there's more than that. Because Puka could be here, here, or here and corrupt the alchemists, make him lie. That's a 1 out of 3 chance. But then on top of that, there's an additional 2 out of 9 chance. So there's a 5 out of 9 chance, better than a coin flip, that the alchemist is lying. Because there's a 3 out of 9 chance that he's being corrupted by Puka. That's Puka being here, here, or here. He could also be corrupted by, if Puka's elsewhere, he could be corrupted by the puppeteer or the minion. 3 out of 9 plus 2 out of 9 is 5 out of 9. That's better than a coin flip. That's better than my odds against the knight. Maybe I shoot the alchemists. Does that tell me anything? If I shoot the alchemist and you're a real alchemist, we're right back where we started. Because you could... Ooh, that's a 5 out of 9 chance that he's lying. Not a 5 out of 9 chance that he's evil. There's only a 3 out of 9 chance that he's evil. Well, 4 out of 9, because he could be the puppet, but if he's the puppet, he's not lying. Oof. I feel like I pulled a lot of threads and I just can't find any that work. All we know for sure is there's a minion in one of our 2 pairs. This Empress, if we shoot... No, this Empress, if we shoot you and you're evil, we know you're telling the truth. You would be a minion and you would be a truth-telling villager. That would be true whether you're the puppet or not. Which means Puka would be elsewhere. If we shoot you and you're a minion, this can't be Puka because you're implicating the other one, and that would be true. If we shoot you and you're an Empress, this still can't be Puka. Because Puka is a demon, and demons must be a unique villager. The Empress is not a unique villager. Puka can't double claim the Empress. That only works because this Empress is implicating the other one. If we shoot you and you're a minion, we know you're a villager. If we shoot you and you're an Empress, we know you can't be Puka because of the rules of engagement for demons. Does that logic work the other way? What if we shoot you and you're a minion? If we shoot you and you're a minion, we know you're not Puka because a lying Empress only points at good characters. And she's pointing at the other Empress. Yeah, the Empresses are implicating each other, one directly and one indirectly. If I shoot you and you're a minion, you can't be Puka. If I shoot you and you're an Empress, you still can't be Puka. If I shoot you and you're a doppelganger, you have to be an Empress. Puka can't be here. There's four possibilities. No, there's three possibilities. You could be a minion, you could be an Empress, or you could be a doppelganger. If I shoot you and you're a minion, you can't be Puka because you'd be telling the truth about this Empress. If I shoot you and you're an Empress, you can't be Puka because of the rules of engagement. If I shoot you and you're a doppelganger, you have to be an Empress to make up the other side of the pair. Okay. You can't be Puka and you can't be Puka. We must have a doppelganger. Yeah, we have a doppelganger. We for sure have a doppelganger. What does that say about the lover? Because if you can't be Puka, this lover cannot get corrupted. If this lover's lying, it's because she's evil. Now, you can't be Puka, but either of you could be a minion. Which means we could have a minion here. So if I shoot you and you're a minion, we know you're lying. Puka could be the knight, corrupting her from the other direction, though. Okay, so we do learn a lot if we shoot one of these Empresses. So if we shoot you, we learn about 2, 3, and 6. If we shoot you, we learn about 3, 9, and 5. If you're a doppelganger or a minion, we can trust the information. If not, you could be corrupted by Puka if Puka is here or here. Does that make sense? That makes sense. God, I've been on this one village for like an hour, and we haven't made any decisions yet. Four evils. Like half the village is evil. Just any given random shot, we have a 4 in 9 chance of hitting a demon. If I take a shot at the knight and he's good, I know for sure the lover's not lying unless she's evil. Because Puka can't be in the knight's spot in that point. So sussing out that Puka can't be here tells me more about this knight if I shoot him and he's a real knight. Is there any way I can remove Puka from the other pair? For Puka to be in this pair, it would have to be a minion Puka pair. Not literally the minion. It could be the puppeteer. So it would have to... Actually, if it was a minion Puka pair, it would make sense because they're both lying about where minion and the Puka are in that case. But if it's minion puppeteer, or if it's Puka puppeteer, rather, we just put the minion somewhere else and they could still both be lying. That works either way. So I know Puka's down here somewhere. Neither of you... That's not true. I was about to say neither of you could be the puppeteer, but that's not true at all. If you're good, can the left side still be more evil? Like, you could be a minion. We know you can't be Puka, but you could be a minion. And then I would need to place 2 more over here. And I think I could do that pretty easily. Yeah, there's no reason that's not the case. I might just have to shoot the knight. You're saying 3, 5, or 9. You're saying 2, 3, or 6. If I could catch any of you in a lie, so much would unravel. But you're just not giving me... Like, the information's too far spread. There's so many ways Puka and the minion could be... You're not saying away from each other. You're saying away from closest evil. Hold on. If you're a Puka minion pair, the puppeteer and the puppet would have to be in here. In which case, you're lying, and that doesn't make sense. Oh, you could be Puka. And then you could be lying to that. And then you're telling the truth. But then you're lying. Puka and the minion could be right next to each other. Like minion Puka. But then you're telling the truth. So that doesn't work. Minion Puka. But then you're corrupted. So that doesn't work. Can I rule you guys out from being the doppelganger pair like this? By putting the Puka and minion next to each other. For both of you to be telling the truth. Which is the only way you could be the doppelganger pair. Puka would have to be somewhere where neither of you are getting corrupted. So not here, not here, not here, not here. And we know Puka's not here. So Puka would have to be way over here. Someone would have to be next to her. Like we know that there's a minion pair here. So Puka and a minion. So let's say Puka and puppeteer, but then this would be a puppet. That could work. Puka and puppeteer. But then the puppet would be here, and then where does the minion go? Because the minion would have to be down here, and then he's not one card away from closest evil. So if we say Puka minion, that satisfies both. But then the puppeteer and puppet can't go here, because both of you would have to be lying. Right? If both of you are telling the truth, we can't put Puka here because one of you would be corrupt. We can't put Puka here because we've ruled Puka out from there. So Puka's in one of these two spots. If Puka's the knight, that accounts for your lie and your lie. Then we could put the minion next to you to satisfy both scouts. And we could put the minion in either place. It doesn't matter. But then the puppeteer's got to go here. Because if we're saying this is a doppelganger pair, both telling the truth, we're saying that there's a minion or a puppeteer up here. So if there's a minion, something like puppeteer. Yeah, this doesn't. I don't know that this works. If you're both telling the truth, we're saying Puka's not here, Puka's not here, Puka must be up here. Because if Puka was here, you'd be corrupt and you wouldn't be telling the truth. If you're both telling the truth, Puka's over here somewhere. I need Puka to be one card away from the closest evil, and I need the minion to be one card away from the closest evil. So I would still need a minion here. So I could put minion, Puka. But then you have to be lying. So like puppeteer, puppet would, even if this guy's the puppet, that would work. But then how are you guys lying? You're lying and you're lying. So that doesn't work. If Puka's here, they're both lying. That's fine. Let's put the minion right next door to satisfy the scouts. But then you guys are still lying. For this to be a doppelganger pair, both telling the truth does not work. If it's a doppelganger pair and one of them's lying because of Puka, then Puka would have to be here, which accounts for 3 lies. Puka could be alone here, and then the minion, puppet, and puppeteer could be on this side. But no, that doesn't work, because then you're telling the truth. And if you're Puka, corrupting you, then I can do puppeteer, puppet. But then the minion would have to go over here, in which case you're still lying. Can only one of you be telling the truth? Puka is 1 card away from closest evil, but then the minion's on his own. Or minion's 1 card away from closest evil, but then Puka's on her own. I think these are equivalent statements, because neither Puka nor the minion need another minion next to them the way the puppeteer does. I think any logic we use on one could be used on the other. The only difference is that Puka creates more liars next to her. What's my streak? Right here. I'm on 19. I didn't stream all these. This is actually only like the 2nd or 3rd village I've done today. I've been on it for like an hour. Just working my way through it. Let's see if I can get one of these 2 scouts to be a liar. Okay. If you're telling the truth, can I make you a liar? You're telling the truth. Puka's 1 card away from closest evil. In this case, Puka can't be here because you'd be corrupted. Puka could be here. Oh yeah, let's place Puka here. That corrupts these nerds. But then one of them has to be evil. And it would have to be the puppet. Right? Because if it was the puppeteer, then you're a puppet. But if you're a truth-telling scout, we're saying you're the doppelganger. So if you're the doppelganger, Puka would have to go here. But then you would have to be corrupted but not evil. You can't be the puppeteer because then there's nowhere for your puppet to go. You can't be the minion because then they'd both be telling the truth. So if you're telling the truth, and Puka is here, accounting for this corruption, then the minion, puppet, and puppeteer would be going on the other side. which means your corruption doesn't make sense. You're telling the truth. You're saying left side is more evil. Because if I've got Puka here, if you're a doppelganger, Puka could be here. You're not affected by Puka. This could be Puka. And if this is the doppelganger pair, this could be a puppeteer and a puppet, thereby making the right side more evil. But if you're Puka, how are you lying? Because if you're a doppelganger, you're a villager. So yeah, you can't... If you're Puka, how are you lying, is what we're saying. Because we're testing a case where you're telling the truth and you're lying. If you're telling the truth, Puka can't be here, because then where does your lie come from? If you're... Yeah, you can't. So if you're telling the truth, we're saying Puka is here or Puka is here. Has to be. For you to be telling the truth, this would have to be Puka, but then I think we run into problems. Because we can't put evil here, because we're saying Puka's... Oh, we are saying Puka's one card away from closest evil. Right. But I can't put the puppeteer here, because then where does the puppet go? And I can't put the minion here, because then you'd be telling the truth. That's why you'd have to be clean. Well, you'd have to be a villager. You'd be a corrupt villager. But in that case, the right side would be more evil. And I've got Puka here. And I could place puppeteer puppet to make that work. So yeah, Puka doesn't work here if you're telling the truth. So Puka would have to go here. Because if you're telling the truth, we need somebody next to Puka, and we've proven we're saying you're not evil, and we're saying you can't be the puppeteer, the puppet, or the minion. So you can't be Puka, which puts Puka over here. But if Puka was here, if you're telling the truth and Puka is here, then you're corrupt, and you would have got cured by this alchemist. So the alchemist would have to be evil. So you're telling the truth, you're Puka, you're corrupt. Puka needs somebody next door. Put the minion right there. No, it can't be the minion. It has to be the puppeteer or the puppet. In some combination. We're saying Puka, puppeteer, puppet. Now we're saying left side is more evil. Yeah, that makes sense. Puka's here. The minion can't be next door because we want this scout to be a liar. Puka's here. But then Puka's telling the truth. Right? That doesn't work. If you're telling the truth, this can't be Puka. Because you're pointing clockwise. And that's where the next evil that you're sitting next to, that the scout is talking about, would have to go. You cannot be telling the truth if you are lying. We can't make it work. Can we do it the other way? If you're telling the truth and you're lying, the minion is one card away from closest evil, but Puka is on her own. In that case, let's say Puka's here, accounting for this lie and this lie. But now we're saying the right side is more evil. But Puka's on her own. So there's nowhere else to put evil. They'd have to go up here. So puppeteer and puppet, and then minion. And then you're telling the truth. Puppeteer, puppet, minion. You're lying, which makes sense. You're telling the truth. That I can do. If you're lying, Puka's here. To make both sides equally evil, this Empress has to be good. If you're lying and Puka's here, you're a doppelganger, so you're not affected. Minion's still one card away from closest evil. So Puka's here, you're corrupt. So we could place one evil here and then the other two over here, and either way the architect is lying. That situation unfortunately works. It doesn't work in this direction, but it works in this direction. You could be
You could be telling the truth and you could be lying, but you can't be telling the truth if you are lying. If both of you are telling the truth, it's super easy because we just put Puka and the minion next to each other. If neither of you are telling the truth, Puka and the minion are just on their own, and then Puppeteer and Puppet are next to each other somewhere else. Dang it. That was a lot of work to go nowhere. If you're Puka, you have to be some kind of minion. Let's see if we can put more blue tabs down. Blue tabs are just somewhere Puka can't go. If you're Puka, you're lying. I don't know if this is going to go anywhere. If you're Puka, you're lying, so the Empress and the Architect are both good. So you're saying the right side would be more evil in that case. Yeah, I think there's so many ways we could make that work. It's not worth going through the logic for each character. Could they be Puka? There's so many. The search space is just way too big. Are we coming back around to taking a shot at one of these Empresses or taking a shot at the Knight? Shoot. We're just not going to get anywhere else, are we? The problem with taking a shot at the Empress is we've removed from the possibility space one of the evils. The Knight could be any of the 4 evils, but the Empress can only be 3 of them. I only get 1 shot. If I shoot someone and I'm wrong, I take 5 damage and I've only got 10 hit points, so I can't take 2 shots. Can I prove this alchemist is lying somehow? If you're telling the truth, then Puka is either here, here, or here. If Puka's here, this lie is accounted for. Puka can't be the Knight. If Puka's the Knight, you're corrupted, but you're pointing up here. If Puka's the Knight, you're telling the truth, but if Puka's the Knight, you can't be telling the truth. God, I feel like I should have seen that an hour ago. Yeah, if you're Puka, but you're telling the truth, you can't... Oh, if you're Puka, the alchemist could have... Oh, that's why I ruled that out. If you're Puka here, and the alchemist is good, you've been cured. Yeah, that makes sense. And if you're Puka, the scout is corrupt, but then the scout was cured. You can't be Puka, but if you're Puka, the architect is corrupt, and then the architect was cured. So the Knight can absolutely be Puka. It's coming down to who do I take a shot at? The Knight or one of the Empresses? And whichever Empress we shoot, we learn something about the other one. Whether they're an Empress or a doppelganger or an evil. The question is, do we get close? Do we get enough information to unravel the rest? It's easy to make both of you tell the truth. It's easy to make you both liars, but I can't make one of you tell the truth unless it's you. You can't be telling the truth if you're lying. Do I shoot the knight? Do I shoot an empress? There has to be more logic to do. There has to be somewhere more to do. I just can't see it. If this is a doppelganger pair, the architect is evil. If this is a doppelganger pair, we get a lot of valuable information. If we shoot you and you're an empress, the other could be a minion or a doppelganger. If we shoot you and you're a minion, we know we're not in a doppelganger pair. If we shoot you and you're a doppelganger, we know we are in a doppelganger pair. Because if you're a doppelganger, we know that your information is good. Like if you're the doppelganger, we know there's an evil here, here, or here. And the only one we have in common is the 3. Okay, maybe we don't get as much information as I thought, because the other empress could be lying. She could be a lying empress, because Puka could be next to her. Oh my goodness. It doesn't feel good to just have to take the shot to get more information. But I think shooting an empress, if you are evil, we learn a lot. We learn you're lying, and you can't, unless you're Puka, if we shoot you and you're evil but you're not Puka, we learn quite a bit, because one of these would have to be evil. Do I like one empress over the other if I've got to shoot one? You're implicating the other empress, but you get just as much information because you're being implicated by the other empress. Like, either way, we learn the information. You're saying 3, 5, or 9. You're saying 2, 3, or 6. If we shoot you and you are a doppelganger, we know all 3 of you are good. If we shoot you and you are an empress, you could be a lying empress if this lover is Puka. Flip a coin? No, you don't want to do coin flips. You don't want to just YOLO. If you YOLO, this saved village's number never goes up. You want to make sure you're playing the best you can without YOLOing it. No amount of saying in chat, just YOLO it and pick somebody, is going to make me do it. I'm only going to take the shot if I feel like I've exhausted every other avenue of logical thread. Trolling in the chat that I should just roll a dice or flip a coin is idiotic! And I'm not going to do that. I'm only going to take the shot if I don't have another choice. And even if I'm going to take a shot, I'm going to have to work out who I get the most information from. And I think it's one of the 2 empresses. Just because this is so valuable if it's a doppelganger pair. If the knight is evil, we learn a lot. But if the knight is good, we kind of don't learn that much. We learn that you're good. We learn that you're not corrupted in any way. No, we learn the opposite, don't we? Because it's less likely that you're good in that case. If you're evil, you're confirmed. If you're good, you're pointing at a good person, which means it's got to be the lover evil. Because we ruled out this empress from being evil if you're telling the truth. But if you're Puka, you could be Puka, and then you could just have gotten your corruption cured. If you're Puka, that confirms the alchemist. That's good information to have. I will sit here all day on this one puzzle if I feel I'm making progress by thinking it through. I have no problem sitting here all day. I get frustrated when I watch people play puzzle games and they get to a point where they're just like, oh, I give up. I don't care anymore. Like, no, sit down and think it through. Do the puzzles. Figure it out. Where was I? This enlightened. What kind of constraints does the enlightened put on the puzzle? Because it kind of doesn't matter if he's telling the truth or not. Once we have some evil on the board, he becomes constrained anyway. Like, we get information from an enlightened as soon as we get some evil on the board. Because if he's lying, we just turn the arrows around, right? Like, the arrows are good, we just have to know if he's lying or not. How many liars do we have? We've got 1, 2, 3 demons, plus up to 2 Puka'd people. We've determined lots of ways the alchemist could be telling the truth. We've determined ways this scout can be telling the truth, right? Puka's 1 card away from closest evil. You're a doppelganger. You're Puka. You're a minion. So both of you were lying. Both of you were telling the truth. And then the puppet and puppeteer are just elsewhere. That works out easily. So yes, you could absolutely be telling the truth. You could definitely be telling the truth. You could definitely be telling the truth. You could definitely be telling the truth. You could absolutely be telling the truth. You could certainly be telling the truth. Both of you could be telling the truth together very easily. So we can't... Yeah, we already exhausted that possibility. If I shoot the lover, do I learn anything? If I shoot the knight and he's a knight, we learn basically nothing. If I shoot the knight and he's a knight, we learn basically nothing. Well, we learn that there's a confirmed character on the board. But if he's not corrupt, we don't lose any health, and I can take a second shot. If I shoot the knight and he's corrupt, that's my 1 shot taken. And that's the worst case scenario. For that to be true, Puka would have to be here or here. If I shoot you and you're corrupt, I learn Puka's location, which is very valuable indeed. Because one of you is bad. Is a bad Puka. If I shoot the knight and he's not corrupt, I confirm the knight, which half confirms the lover and it like half implicates the enlightened. Look at that situation. This is a confirmed knight. You've only got 1 empress on the other side. And then we know the Empress can't be Puka. And on this side, you're pointing to a good knight and a very potentially good lover, which is bad for you. So either you'd be evil. You couldn't be Puka in that case because you would have been corrupted. You could be pretty much anything else. All right, I'm going to shoot the knight. It's time. It's Puka. You got lucky. I mean, I did get lucky, but I ran through all of the possibilities. Okay. So you're telling the truth, then. Puka's the closest evil. Unless the scout is also evil. Oh, God. Well, your lie is accounted for. So the lover could still be evil. The enlightened could still be evil. The enlightened can't be. Well, the enlightened could be evil if the scout is also evil. If we've got like a puppeteer puppet situation, puppeteer puppet, right? Or minion puppet, whatever. Look, Puka said that was lucky, but that wasn't just blind luck. It was like I worked through it. I figured out where to take the shot and what I would get under any of the three circumstances that could have been. And all three of them were favorable to me. Like, I didn't just randomly pick somebody. This is why I don't like streaming anymore. I swear to God. Every time I stream. Every single time I stream. What was my train of thought here? Okay, I've got a Puka down. So Puka's not... If we're lying, we're evil. On this side of the board now. For sure. Are either of you pointing at 7? No. Nobody was saying anything about the knight. You're saying Puka's one card away from closest evil. So you're saying there's an evil here or here. You're looking like you could be telling the truth. You're looking like you could be telling the truth. Minion's one card away from closest evil. Still very, very possible. Nana Buttface has been on this kick for months that any form of randomness or RNG in a video game is a coin flip. And he's just wrong and incredibly stupid. The man's not stupid. I know him better than that. He's incredibly stubborn is what he is. Any form of RNG whatsoever is the equivalent of a dice roll in his mind. He doesn't actually believe that, but he has to hold that line to argue against a bad experience he had in a game. He can't just admit that he had a bad experience in a game. He has to ruin everybody else's games. No, that was a calculated risk. Obviously, there's some luck involved, but it's not... I didn't just roll a die and pick someone at random to shoot. And I didn't have any other logical threads to... Like, I exhausted the logic on the board. I determined which person of these 9 was the best to shoot, and I determined that all 3 possible outcomes were in my favor. Like, that was a good move, in my opinion. That there was nothing lucky about that. If this had not been Puka, we would still have advanced our game state, right? If this had been a knight, we would know more. If this had been a corrupted knight, we would know more. And the chance of getting a corrupted knight was very low, right? It was 2 out of 9. So, like, yeah, that's the best possible shot we could have taken to advance the game state. Managing luck is a skill. Managing luck in video games, managing your RNG is a skill you can learn and is necessary in a lot of different genres. But if you hold the opinion that all RNG is just dice rolls, then you're never going to learn that skill. You're never going to get good at it. Where was I? I'm done yelling at Buttface now. He's being a Buttface. We know it. Okay. If you're lying over here, you're evil. That's what we know. If you're telling the truth, then you're telling the truth. You're lying, but that's accounted for because you're next to Puka. You're saying 2, 3, or 6. You're saying 3, 5, or 9. You're saying that the lover or the enlightened is evil. Both possible. Now that Puka's out of the equation, let's look at these scouts again. Can we make this into a scout minion pair? I guess one way to look at it is my doppelganger pair is completely trustworthy now. If I know where the doppelganger is, I know both of the people in that pair are telling the truth. Could you both be telling the truth? Yes, because this could be a minion. If this lover is a minion, you both are telling the truth and you're fine. In that case, this is the doppelganger pair. The only way to have a pair is to have a minion in them. No, it's not. Puppeteer, puppet. I could have a scout puppet pair, and then the scout would still be telling the truth. But then I can trust them anyway. And I know I can trust my other empresses. Ooh, that's actually a good situation for me to be in if I'm in a scout puppet pair. Anyway, I can make them both tell the truth very easily. Can I make them both lie very easily? Yeah, just put the minion... Like, this is a doppelganger pair. Drop the minion here. But then where's the puppeteer and puppet? If you're both lying, somebody's got to be next to Puka. No, nobody's got to be next to Puka. If you're both lying, they're both good. If they're both lying, they're both good because they're a doppelganger pair. If they're both lying, good, 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 good. Okay. So puppeteer... puppet, minion. Would that work? No, because where does your lie come from? If you're lying, you're evil. So, puppeteer, puppet, minion. That works. They could both be lying in that regard. So you can both be telling the truth, or you could both be lying. Because you could be a puppeteer, you could be a puppet. No, you can't. If you're a puppeteer, you need to say equidistant. Puppeteer, puppet, does that work? Yes, because you should be saying equidistant and you're not. But then who did you cure? Now you're lying. And amount of minions to place. Puppeteer, puppet, minion. That's the only way to make them two liars. But... if you're the puppeteer and you're the puppet, your lie makes sense. Puppeteer, puppet, minion. But then you didn't cure anybody. So you're lying an amount of lies. Puppeteer, puppet, but then you're lying. And you didn't cure anybody. Puppeteer, puppet, but then you're lying. Oh, but if you're the puppeteer, you didn't get cured. Puppeteer, puppet, then you're lying, but that's accounted for. Left side is more evil. That works. Puppeteer puppet works. No, because we're saying you're lying. You can't be the puppet. Puppeteer puppet. That works. No, because now you're lying. You can't be the puppet. So puppeteer puppet doesn't work. Puppeteer puppet doesn't work. Puppeteer puppet doesn't work. Puppeteer puppet doesn't work. So then the puppeteer and puppet would have to be up here. But it would have to be puppeteer puppet. But then you're telling the truth. The minion's here, but the left side's not more evil. Puppeteer puppet, but then you're not lying. I don't think I can make them both lie. And if I can't make them both lie, I can easily make both of them tell the truth. I can't make both of them lie. I'm not sure how that helps me, though. So you were lying, but you got cured. So now you're telling the truth. Let's work through this. If you're telling the truth, then you're telling the truth. If you're telling the truth and you're telling the truth, then you're lying. Oh, no, not necessarily. You're saying evil could be the architect. No, that works. If you're telling the truth and you're telling the truth, and the architect is evil, in some ways, this is like the worst roll of characters I think I've seen. These big puka maps, man. I had no abilities at all to use. No gesture, no nothing. These I guess I can get rid of now because I know that they're not puka. If I could trust the alchemist, some things would shake out, yeah. Neither Empress is implicating the alchemist. It's not looking good for that architect. If this Empress is evil, you're a liar. Which means if this Empress is evil, you're evil. Because if this Empress is evil... Why did that make sense in my head a minute ago? No, not necessarily. It's just we can make left side more evil. No problem. Okay. If this Empress is evil, we can't have both sides equally evil. But I don't think that's going to come into play anyway. Okay, the two Empresses situation is just like it was, except neither of them could be lying. Because of corruption. You're now telling the truth, or you're lying because the scout is evil. Can the scout be evil? You could be a puppeteer, a minion, or a puppet. If you're a puppet and you're a puppeteer, your lie makes sense. Because you didn't get cured. If you're a puppeteer and you're a puppet, you can't be a puppet. You can never be a puppet. Because I cured one corruption is not something you can say truthfully if you're evil. Okay. If you're a minion, you would have to be the puppeteer. I'm trying to make this enlightened lie in this situation. Like, this statement as it stands is a lie. Only if this scout is evil. And if you're the puppeteer, you can't be the puppet, because then you'd be lying, and puppets don't lie. If you're the puppeteer, you'd be the puppet, but you can't be the puppet. Because then you're lying, and puppets can't lie. If you're the minion, then you're lying. But you'd only be lying if you didn't get cured. So then you would have to be the puppeteer. Which would make you the puppet. So puppet, puppeteer, minion, puka, but then where does your lie come from? Because now you're the puppet. You'd be telling the truth. Left side is more evil. But in this case, we're saying puppet, puppeteer, minion, puka. 2 evils on the left, 2 evils on the right. That's, both sides are equally evil. Did I just prove that you can't be lying in this case? Have I shown definitively there's 3 cases where you could be lying? This is a puppeteer, but then this, you can't be the puppet because your lie doesn't make sense. You can't be the puppet because your lie doesn't make sense. So you can't be the puppeteer. If you're the puppeteer and you're the puppet, had I ruled that out, you're the puppeteer and you're the puppet, then you're lying, and that makes sense. You're the puppeteer, you're the puppet. Then the minion could go, oh, that would work. There's a case that works. Shoot. You could be lying if you're the puppeteer and you're the minion. Because if you're the puppeteer, that means you're lying. You didn't cure anybody. And you're lying because you're pointing left, but you should be pointing equidistant. And you're the puppet, which means you're telling the truth. And then the minion can go up here. So we're saying, in this case, puppeteer, here, let's, puppeteer, puppet, minion. Okay? And then puka. Let's take a look. Everybody else would have to be telling the truth. For this case to work. We're proving you're a liar by taking away your cure, by putting an evil next to you, and then putting the minion up here. Okay, so 1 of 2, 3, and 6. That doesn't work. It's broken immediately. Because you're saying 1 of 2, 3, and 6 is evil, but they're not. You're telling the truth in that case. You're telling the truth because we've got a minion over here. But you're also lying. That doesn't work. I think we've proved that you're telling the truth. And if you're telling the truth, you're telling the truth. Okay. So you could be the minion, but you can't be the puppeteer or the puppet. You're telling the truth in this. No, not necessarily. You could be a minion or something. Cured 1 corruption. You cured the enlightened. I'm looking hard at this architect now. I need to place 3 evils on the side of the board to make one side more evil than the other. We've got 1. I guess I could do that with a scout and the lover. You're lying because you're next to Puka, but you could also just have been evil, in which case Puka didn't corrupt anybody. She tried, but she sat in the wrong place. If you're the minion, that satisfies both scouts. And then this is a doppelganger pair, and then this isn't a doppelganger pair. So if you're the minion, the puppeteer's got to go up here. That would work. That would work fine. If you're the minion, that accounts for your lie. But then the puppeteer and puppet have to go up here somewhere. Because here's the thing. If you're the minion, you're telling the truth and you're telling the truth. If you're both telling the truth, it's either because you're the doppelganger pair or it's because one of you is a puppet. You can't be a puppet because there's nowhere for the puppeteer to sit. You could be a puppet, but only if one of these is a puppeteer. So if you're a minion, I've got to place another evil somewhere on the left. And I can only place the puppeteer or the puppet, which means there's no way you can be lying. If you're the minion, you can't be lying. Not possible. Because how else would I create a lie? You'd have to be... Oh, yeah, okay, puppeteer. Puppet. That would work, wouldn't it? Puppeteer, puppet, and then you're a doppelganger. No, because then you're lying. I don't think you can be the minion. Can you be the puppeteer? It's hard to know. I got to take a step away for a second. Refresh my drink. I'll be right back. Okay. Yeah, for this scout to be telling the truth, this lover has to be evil. That's kind of what I'm attacking at the moment. But there's 3 possibilities. If you're the puppeteer, you're the puppet. If you're the puppeteer and you're the puppet, you're a doppelganger pair. If you're a doppelganger pair, you have to both be telling the truth. You're the puppeteer, you're the puppet, you're the minion in that case. So we've got all 4 of them lined up top. So puppeteer, puppet, minion. In that case, both scouts check out because Puka would be one away from the puppeteer, and the minion would be one away from the puppet. And it would have to go in that order: puppeteer, puppet, minion. So you'd be telling the truth, but you're not. If you're the puppet, that breaks immediately. So puppeteer, puppet does not work, because you have to be telling the truth, and you're not. Puppeteer, puppet. What if you're the puppet? Well, you can't be the puppet, because you're lying, and puppets don't lie. So that only leaves minion. Minion and Puka next to each other immediately exonerates these two scouts. And then the puppeteer and puppet are still at large. Well, if the minion's here, then both scouts are telling the truth. That doesn't mean they're the doppelganger pair, because one of them could be the puppet. You can't be a puppet. And you can't be a puppeteer. If you're the minion, you're a villager. We have a puppeteer and a puppet to place. Evil, evil. So puppeteer, puppet. That checks out. And that checks out. So puppeteer, puppet checks out. So now you're telling the truth, you're telling the truth, you're cued the corruption, and the left side's more evil. So that's a case where that this lover could be a minion. Because the minion would be here. Puka would be one card away from this minion. The minion would be one card away from Puka. So they're together. And then puppeteer, puppet works just fine. They're a doppelganger pair telling the truth. The left side is more evil because these three are evil. Corruption is cured. This puppeteer is lying because she's pointing at three villagers. And this puppet is telling the truth because she's pointing at a puppeteer. So this could be a minion. That's the case if they're both telling the truth, if this is the doppelganger pair. That's the only way it works. It doesn't work with a puppeteer, it doesn't work with a puppet. But it could work with the minion. It's a minion, right? Yeah, we got just a regular minion. Because this works as a puppeteer and puppet pair. Puka's one away from the minion. The minion's one away from Puka. You're a doppelganger and a scout. You still cured this enlightened. You're still pointing at Puka. And the left side is more evil. Yeah, that works just fine. Shoot. So yeah, Scout 2 could totally be telling the truth. How does this shake out now that Puka's not around? If you're a minion, all three of you are exonerated. You can't be a minion. Unless you're the puppeteer and you're the puppet. But if you're the puppeteer and you're the puppet and you're the minion, then how are you telling the truth? You can't be. So let me walk through that. If you're the minion, we need to place one more evil on the left to make the left side more evil. Right? But where would they go? All that's left is a puppeteer and a puppet. And they both need somebody next door. Lover's got nobody next door because she's surrounded by Puka and a minion. Scout's got nobody next door because he's surrounded by 2 confirmed villagers. So if you're a minion, the puppeteer and the puppet got nowhere to live on the left. They got to go on the right. If they go on the right, we got to make the architect a liar. The only way to do that is to make her the puppeteer. So if you're a minion, you're a puppeteer. And if you're a puppeteer, you're a puppet. But if you're a puppet, you're telling the truth about Puka being one card away from the closest evil. But Puka's not one card away from the closest evil. She's one card away from a lover and an enlightened. You're not the minion. Let's rule out minions. You could be the minion. You can't. Whew. Are you a minion? Or does it kind of... No, because you're not on the left side. So this would be different. Also, if you're the minion, yeah, you're pointing at 3 villagers. That works. If you're the minion, you're pointing at 3 villagers, presuming that Empress is an Empress. Let's roll out that possibility first. Who would you have to be? If you're the minion, then you're either the puppeteer or the puppet. And if that's the case, the lover is whoever you're not. So, you're pointing at 2, 3, and 6. In other words, if this is a minion, and this is a puppeteer and a puppet, and we've got all the evils up top here, who the hell are you pointing at? You're pointing across the board, which means you are lying, which means you'd have to be the puppeteer, which means you would have to be the puppet, which you can't be because you're lying. So that doesn't work. It doesn't work the other way either. Minion. If you're the puppeteer, you're the puppet, and that doesn't work. If you're the puppet, you have to be pointing to a real evil, and you're not, because all the evil's spoken for. You can't be the minion. We are walking the board, making sure we can't put a minion down anywhere. What about you? Could you be a minion? You're talking about the minion. You're saying the minion's 1 card away from closest evil. If you're the minion, you're lying about... And that checks out. You could totally be the minion. Because then you'd be just lying about where you are. But if you're the minion... you're either the puppeteer or you're saying that she's the puppeteer. You could be the puppeteer. Have I ruled that out? If you're the puppeteer, you're the puppet. If you're the puppet... yeah, if you're the puppeteer, you'd have to be the puppet, but then you could be the minion lying about where the minion is. But no, if you're the puppeteer, you're a doppelganger pair, which means you're not lying about where the minion is, which means you'd have to be puppeteer, puppet, minion, and you're pointing to... well, no, puppeteer, puppet, you'd have to be pointing to evil. You can't... you could be the minion too, but you can't be a puppet or puppeteer, I don't think. Have I ruled out the puppeteer pair here? If you're the puppeteer, that works because you're pointing to 3 villagers. You're the puppet, and you're pointing to the puppeteer. That does work. So minion, puppeteer, puppet, that works. Right? It doesn't work the other way because you're pointing at the other Empress. If you're the puppeteer, the 3 you're pointing to have to be good, but then this would be the puppet, which means... yeah, that doesn't work. It would have to be puppeteer and then puppet. Minion, puppeteer, puppet. Then Puka's 1 away from the minion. The minion's 1 away from Puka. You cured a corruption, and the left side's more evil. That's the only way that works up top. It's starting to look like the 2 scouts are telling the truth, and that lover is a minion. If you're the minion, lying about where the minion is, you're saying the minion's 1 card away from closest evil, but if you're the minion, that's a lie, and that checks out. Your lie is accounted for. You're saying I've got a puppeteer and a puppet to place in this case. And it could go up here. You're the minion, puppeteer puppet. You're a corrupted lover. But then you're not. Your lie's unaccounted for. Minion. If you're the minion, you can't be the puppeteer, right? If you're the puppeteer, you're the puppet. If you're the puppeteer, you're the puppet, and the minion has to be 2, 3, or 6 because you'd have to be telling the truth. If you're the puppeteer and you're the puppet, you would be telling the truth. We've ruled out puppeteer and puppet from here. So if you're the minion, this can't be puppeteer puppet. The only way to make the other scout as a liar is to make you the puppeteer. If you're the puppeteer and you're the puppet, both sides are equally evil, which means your lie is unaccounted for. If you're the puppeteer and you're the puppet, you're pointing to a minion, and that works. No, it doesn't. If you're the puppeteer and you're the puppet, your lie's still unaccounted for. I don't think you can be the minion. I just don't think you can do it. If you're the minion, we've ruled out puppeteer and puppet from here, which means we've got to make you a liar, and the only way to do that is to make you the puppeteer. But that makes the architect a liar. So we've got evil, evil, evil. And then if you're evil, you'd be the puppet. But puppets tell the truth, and you're lying. If we make you the puppet, you're still lying, and your lie's unaccounted for. I don't think you can be a minion, and you can't be a puppeteer, and you can't be a puppet. You, sir, are on the up and up. We have exonerated you. So now the only way this architect is telling the truth is if the Empress and the lover are evil, and we've seen a bunch of situations where that's the case. Can we make you a liar? What if you're the minion, my lass? You see what I mean? We're making progress. We're inching forward bit by bit by bit. We're getting there. God, I'm going to be playing this game for years, aren't I? Okay, so you're the minion. That's what we're saying. We can't have puppeteer and puppet over here. So if you're the minion, your lie is unaccounted for, and your lie is unaccounted for. And it just doesn't work. I think you're a doppelganger pair, and I think it's evil up all across the board. I think we've got a minion here, and then a puppeteer and a puppet. That's what I think. Can you be the minion? If you're the minion, the puppeteer's got to go next to you. If you're the minion, you can't be either. If you're the minion, puppeteer's got to go next to you to make you tell the truth. But then the right side is more evil. Puppeteer, puppet. See, minion, puppeteer, puppet, right side's... Yeah, I think it doesn't work. I don't think you're the minion. I don't think you can be a puppeteer. I don't think you can be a puppet. I think we kill this Empress and see where we are. The puppeteer. And you can't be a puppet. But in this case, you'd have to be a minion. And that makes you the puppet. That took well over an hour. But we got there. We got there in the end. Oh, goodness. That was a tough village. That was village number 20. All right, number 21. We've got, look at all this. Oh, it's awful. All right, we've got one outcast placed and then a second from the Chancellor. We've got Ba and a minion, so no sources of corruption on the red side. Ba puts an extra yellow, a fake yellow down. The Chancellor puts down a real yellow. So we're going to see two outcasts for real. Wretch Bombardier, Plague Doctor, Doppelganger. I was a poet. That's a lie. That's immediately a lie. I'm the original baker. Look at this. Look at this baker situation already. There are no corrupted characters. Fair enough. Let's see if we've got a Plague Doctor on the board. I was a poet. So this baker turned this poet into a baker. That checks out. That could work. So this baker now turned this gemcraft. What if we just get bakers all the way around? Okay, so you're testing first for outcasts. You're saying number 3 is good. There's lots of gem crafters on this board. We got lots of claimed gem crafters. And there's the Bombardier. Okay, so we don't have a Wretch. We don't have a Plague Doctor. If we don't have a Plague Doctor, then you're telling the truth. There's no corrupted characters. We've got a Doppelganger hiding somewhere. And that's our 2 yellows. Because you're yellow, we've got a Doppelganger hiding. The Wretch and the Plague Doctor don't disguise. So we know who our yellows are. We've got a Doppelganger somewhere. Because we don't have a Plague Doctor, we know nobody got corrupted. So you're telling the truth. If you're telling the truth, then you're telling the truth. How do we end up with duplicates in this board? We end up with duplicates. I think Ba is very constrained. Because Ba has to be a unique villager, and I'm looking at a lot of bakers, man. So we can have a doppelganger pair of 2 gem crafters. If you're a doppelganger off of this gem crafter, right? And then you're a minion claiming to be a baker, claiming to be a gem crafter. That would account for 3 gem crafters. So I think we're looking at a minion for sure here. Because there's no other way to get 3 gem crafters. You think Baker 1 is the Chancellor? If you're lying, you're... Well, yeah, if you're lying, you're evil on this board. We don't have any sources of corruption, so we'll just kill you. There's the Chancellor. Good call. Okay, so there's going to be another evil between these 2 bakers, because we can't have 3 gem crafters on the board without one of them being a minion. So this could be a real poet turned into a baker. This could be a real gem crafter turned into a baker. Or this could be a real gem crafter turned into a baker. But these can't both be 2 gem crafters turned into bakers. What are you saying? Between 2, 3, and 5. You're saying there's a villager, a minion, and that's a lie. You're pointing at 2 villagers, my brohim. And now you're dead. You were Ba. So we win this because we know it's one of the 2 bakers, right? Here or here. It's just a matter of do we get it in the first shot or the second. And there's no way to differentiate them. There's no way to tell. So we just shoot one of the bakers, and if it's not, we shoot another one. Is there any other way to get a duplicate gem crafter other than a minion? This has to be a real... So this baker turned this poet into a baker. This baker either turned this gem crafter into a baker or this gem crafter into a baker. And then we have a minion pretending to be a baker. So we just kill a baker. And if it's not you, it's got to be you. There we go. Sometimes they don't take an hour and 45 minutes. Sometimes they go nice and quick. We've got a Chancellor and Lilith to place, so we're going to get some dead people. We're going to have 3 outcasts in this village. My godness. Okay. There's an Empress. There's a Hunter. There's a Bombardier. We're going to lose somebody here. I was a baker. No, that's a lie. That's not what the first baker can't say that. I was a fortune teller. Now, wait a minute. Look at this situation. You're a real baker. You got targeted by the plague doctor, which corrupted you. When you're corrupted, you say you're a random villager roll. You just happened to roll baker. Oh, but if you're corrupted, your ability doesn't work. If you're corrupted, you can't create this baker. If you're a minion pretending to be a baker, you couldn't make this baker. If you're corrupted, if you're a real baker but you've been corrupted, your ability doesn't work. Which means you're lying. There's the plague doctor. There's a slayer. We got options. We got options here. So this could be a dead wretch. Or we could have a doppelganger here. Would a doppelganger who's a baker? No, we would have a baker and a doppelganger in that case. And we'd have 2 starting bakers is how that would work, I would think. Okay, well, let's have the plague doctor test this baker out. Not corrupted? If you're a dead wretch, and this is a minion Lilith pair, you could be fake. I've got a slayer here. If you're not... So if you're telling the truth, and this is not a corrupted baker, it's got to be a minion. And we can try to test that with the slayer. If this... That would exonerate this hunter, because we know this... Oh, this could be a wretch. I suppose. You're saying 3, 4, or 8. You're saying 1, 5, or 8. Let's see what this slayer has to say about this baker. Got him. Yeah, because this baker had to be a minion. So you're not a real baker. Is there any world in which you're a real baker? If you were... Well, you said you're not corrupted. If you're a baker that's been corrupted, you might say, I was a baker. In which case, this could be somebody waiting to become a baker if they were getting flipped. That would mean both of you are on the up and up. But then that doesn't work because you're saying she's not corrupted. So if you're telling the truth and she's not corrupted, then she's evil. Because she's saying I was a baker. And if you did corrupt her, and she's saying I was a baker, and she was going to flip this into a baker, then you must not have corrupted her, in which case she would say, I am the original baker. I think we kill her. I think we murder her. I think we stab her in the neck until she dies. She's Lilith. Who is this? Pick 2 characters, learn if any is evil. That's a fortune teller. So you were pretending to be a fortune teller when we already had one. And we had a corrupted empress up there. Bakers get you there, man. I got to place a Witch, Lilith, and a Chancellor. So I'm going to have 2 yellows on the board, and we're going to lose somebody unless we get an early Lilith kill. 1 is evil, 2, 6, or 9. Let's avoid those for now and see if Lilith will take one of them out, maybe. Okay, that could be a Doppelganger pair. It could also be a Dreamer Minion pair. There's a Knight. I don't have... Oh, I do have a Plague Doctor potentially in play. Well, you said 2, 6, or 9, and now 6 is dead. So now you're just looking at 2 and 9. Bombardier. A second Knight. I am the original Baker. And I can't flip you, but if you're a villager, you're turning into a Baker. So... Oh, you're saying 2, 6, or 9. So you're saying 2. Because you're a villager and you're a Baker. Yo, what if we got Doppelganger Knights? Doppelganger Knights could be cool. We got 2 minions, so these could both be minion pairs, and I still couldn't have a Doppelganger. Right? Like, you could be a Witch, you could be the Chancellor, in which case we don't have a Doppelganger, and you're a Plague Doctor, or you're a Plague Doctor. You're saying 2, 6, 9. If you're telling the truth, it's got to be 2. Because you're a dead villager, and you're a Baker. If you're lying, they're all villagers. Do I point the 2 dreamers at this one and see if they agree? Even if they agree, it doesn't prove anything. I'm still not totally sure the best way to use dreamers, honestly. If we get them to agree, it's fairly likely that they're telling the truth, but it's still not guaranteed, I don't think. Is there any world where you're not a real Bombardier? Let's ask that question. For that to be the case, we would have to have a dead Doppelganger, 2 minion pairs, so the minions are accounted for, and then a Plague Doctor. So the Plague Doctor goes off, the Doppelganger is somebody, and we don't have a Bombardier. You could be a fake Bombardier. That's correct. That could be it. Don't want to go after the Bombardier until we have no other option. I feel like we put the Dreamers on number 2 and see if they agree, and then evaluate from there. If we stab a Knight, oh, there's no source of corruption. I can just stab both these Knights. Oh, no, we got a Plague Doctor, possibly. Yeah. Okay, if we stab a Knight and he's been Plague Doctored, that's bad. It's bad. We die immediately. I think we put the Dreamers on number 2 and see if they agree. But it doesn't really tell us anything. And if they don't agree, they could just be that this is a villager and they're just making stuff up. I don't want it to come down to shooting a Knight. I'd rather not do that. The thing is, I don't have any other options. The only abilities I've got are 2 Dreamers. We're not getting... The only other person on this board saying anything is his Empress. And that's good information. It's telling us that if she's telling the truth, 2 is evil. So, okay, if we point the 2 Dreamers at 2 and they agree, that's a really good indication that this is an evil card. If we point the 2 Dreamers here and they agree, this is an evil card. what are the chances that the Dreamers just... If they agree this is an evil card, but they're wrong because they're evil or something, it could just be that the Dreamers rolled really bad luck. Like, we only learn correct info if evil paired. But if, no matter who we pick, they're going to say, like, oh, that could be the Chancellor. That could be the Witch. So if they both say Witch, doesn't mean this is necessarily the Witch. It could mean that this is a Villager and they both just happen to roll Witch. In which case, the Empress is lying. So if we point the two Dreamers here and they agree and we kill this card and we lose HP, the Empress is lying. And we learn something about this card. If they disagree, then either this card is a Villager or one of them's a minion. Which I agree is not very helpful. But I don't know what other option I have. We could point them to the Empress and see if they agree. That runs into the same issue. If they agree, she's probably evil. What are the odds that they both agree, but they're wrong? It'd be 1 in 9, wouldn't it? 1 in 3 times 1 in 3? Because if you pick a Villager, she's going to pick one of the evils I have and say, oh, it's them. So she would roll 1 in 3, get the Chancellor, then she would roll 1 in 3 and get the Chancellor. If they say this card is the Chancellor, though, we know that it can't be because they're... Oh, nope, there could be a doppelganger. That could totally be the Chancellor. Never mind. Yeah, it's rough not being able to see 2 of the cards. And if they disagree, we just don't know anything about what's going on. If I stab a knight and take damage, I die. I've only got 8 hit points. If I stab a corrupted knight, it's game over. I lose the whole streak. You're saying 2 is evil. And man, I like that. But there's 4 potential liars on this board. Oh, is my health hidden behind my stupid face? Yeah, it's... Yeah, I've only got 8 hit points right now. Pointing the Dreamers at 2 is kind of the best option, but if they disagree, I've learned nothing. If they agree, I think chances are very good that they're evil. Let's just see if they agree. Could be the Witch. Could be the Witch. You're saying 2 is evil. If I stab you and you're not the Witch, I'm down to 3 hit points. I'm still in the game. I think that's... You're the Witch. Haha. So, we're good, we're good, we're good. Now our board's looking much nicer. Now, if you both agree, that means this is a doppelganger pair, doesn't it? There's no other way to have 2 Dreamers. And that means there's a minion. My Chancellor is amongst my knights. And my Chancellor could be in either position, because this could still be a dead Plague Doctor. Both the knights are evil? I don't know that. Okay, let's rule out the Plague Doctor if we can. If this is a dead Plague Doctor, and this is an evil Bombardier, this would have to be the Chancellor next to the dead Plague Doctor. That checks out. But then where's Lilith? Lilith can't be a knight. Lilith has to be a unique Villager. So if you're a dead plague doctor, you would have to be a chancellor, but then Lilith has nowhere to go. Therefore, you cannot be a dead plague doctor. If you're not a dead plague doctor, yeah, Lilith can be a knight if the chancellor is the other knight, but if you're a dead plague doctor, then our 2 yellows are accounted for, which means the bombardier's a fake. The bombardier can only be the chancellor if it's fake. Lilith cannot be an outcast. Always disguises as a unique villager. So Lilith cannot be an outcast. And also, the chancellor would have to sit next to this dead plague doctor. If this is a dead plague doctor and you're the doppelganger, then the chancellor could sit here. No, he couldn't, because the bombardier would have to be evil. So yeah, if this is a dead plague doctor, the chancellor can't sit here, because then Lilith can't be the bombardier. If this is a dead plague doctor, you have to be evils in some way, because I've got 2 yellows. If this is a dead plague doctor, the chancellor's got to go here, but then Lilith can't go anywhere. Ergo, this is not a dead plague doctor. I don't know what this is, but I know it's not a plague doctor. If it's not a plague doctor, I know there's no corruption on the board, and if I know there's no corruption on the board, I know it's safe to stab the knights. There's Lilith. There's the chancellor. And there's a dead lover laying there, just in the street. We have a drunk and a plague doctor. So I've got 2 yellows in my town today. I'm placing Ba and a chancellor. There's a knitter. There's a druid. There's a dreamer. Is that my first drunk? Well, we might not have the drunk. He might not be here. I was a baker. Nope, sorry. I got a hunter pair. There's a poet. There's a plague doctor. Okay. So I have a hunter pair, so doppelgangers in the cards, or there's a drunk kicking around. I don't have a bombardier. But I do have... So this could be a drunk pretending to be a baker. Or it could be the plague doctor's target. Or it could be evil. The problem is... And you could even be a fake plague doctor. If you're the drunk and then we've got a doppelganger pair, you could be a fake plague doctor. Obnoxious. Okay. The poet's saying 2, 3, and 6. Outcast, minion, villager. So you're saying that hunter's a doppelganger, or you're saying one of the 2 of them's a drunk. Yeah, I don't think this poet's telling us anything useful yet. You're saying there's evil next to you. You're saying there's evil next to you. Man, it's not looking good for this baker. It's not looking good for this baker. I'm not going to lie. Can look for outcasts. We need more information, solid information, before we can make use of this druid, I think. Okay. If you're a drunk and one of you is the chancellor, then we don't have a doppelganger pair. That's entirely possible. That means this plague doctor could be real. Well, no, if you... Yeah, if you're the drunk and one of you is the chancellor, that would work. If one of you is the doppelganger, then you are either the plague doctor target or you're evil. Because there isn't a drunk. If we have a doppelganger pair and the plague doctor is real, we don't have a drunk. If we get 2 confirmed civilians, I can point the druid at the plague doctor and see if we... Okay, confirming that plague doctor would do a lot for us. But you're saying there's an outcast between 2, 3, and 6. Any of those characters could be a drunk. No problem. You're saying there's one pair of evil. You're saying the evil are next to each other. The Chancellor and Ba. Do I like that? Chancellor, Ba. But then Chancellor is not next to a yellow. You can't be Ba. Chancellor, Ba. But then your lie is unaccounted for. Chancellor, Ba, but then your lie is unaccounted for. Chancellor, Ba, but then your lie is unaccounted for. Chancellor, Ba, but then your lie is unaccounted for. Their lies aren't unaccounted for, are they? Because we got drunks running around. Okay, so this knitter's not pulling a lot of weight yet. There's lots of ways to make these hunters lie, but the way these hunters are situated, it kind of makes it difficult for the Chancellor and Ba to be next to each other, especially considering the Chancellor is constrained. The Chancellor needs to be next to the Plague Doctor, or next to one of the hunters, or next to the drunk, if we have a drunk. But yeah, it's not looking good for this baker. What do we know for sure about the druid? For sure we know the druid's not an outcast. For sure we know that. Because the druid, if we have a doppelganger on this board, he's one of the hunters. The druid's not a doppelganger. So I can point the druid at herself and a baker testing for drunkenness. But who else would I target? Because anybody could be a drunk. Is this situation, Chancellor Ba, could that work? Chancellor next to the Plague Doctor, Ba here, then both of these hunters are telling the truth. Then you're, well, you okay, yeah, Chancellor Ba, then you're lying, and that makes sense. But then your lie is unaccounted for. Because you're the drunk or got targeted by the Plague Doctor. Okay, that'll work. That would work. Like, both of these hunters could easily be telling the truth if this baker is a drunk. You're drunk, but you're the Chancellor, you're Ba, you're telling the truth, you're telling the truth. That all checks out. And any question asking about are these people lying is not going to help in this town because we've got a Plague Doctor and a potential drunk. It'd be one thing if we knew for sure that we had a Plague Doctor and a drunk, but we don't know that we have either. So, we might have a drunk and a doppelganger and you're a fake Plague Doctor. Alright, I think, even though I don't know if you're real or not, I think we see what you say about the baker. Not corrupted. You're saying the baker's evil. If you're evil, you're the drunk. We can't have a hidden Plague Doctor. If you're evil, we don't have a plagued character. So if you're evil, you're the drunk. If you're evil, and I go, so the druid can't see herself as an outcast. If you're evil, you're the drunk, for sure. There's no other way you can be corrupted. So if the druid goes Plague Doctor, Baker, Druid, whatever she says will be interesting information. If she says there's a drunk, she can't be talking about herself, because then she'd be telling the truth, which we know drunks can't do. She can't be talking about the Plague Doctor, because the drunk presents as a not-in-play villager. If she says any other kind of outcast, we know she's lying. If she says doppelganger, we know she's lying. If she says bombardier, we know she's, like, telling the dumbest lie of all time. Okay. We're looking at yourself and this plague doctor and this baker. There is a plague doctor. Okay. If you're lying, then you're evil and you're evil. Because if you shot this druid, the druid would have to lie, but then the lie couldn't be plague doctor. Does that make sense? If you shot the druid, we have a real plague doctor and she's telling the truth. But if you shot the druid, then she would have to be lying, so she couldn't say plague doctor. She could say doppelganger, but not plague doctor. So if you're lying, it has to be because you're evil. And if you're evil, the plague doctor didn't shoot you and must be evil. Because it means you're lying about there being a plague doctor in these three characters. And this is not a plague doctor. So, we can safely assume you're telling the truth. You're saying she's not corrupted, which means she's not a drunk. Is there a world where you're a drunk? No. If you're a drunk and you're an evil plague doctor, but then you're telling the truth. No, you're telling a lie. Yeah, you're lying. Okay, so if you're drunk and you're lying about there being a plague doctor, yeah, if we shoot this baker and she's not evil, we know the druid's lying. And if we know the druid's lying, we know the plague doctor's evil. That's it. That's the situation. This baker is looking super evil. I'm killing a baker. There's the chancellor. So you're good. You're good. You're one card away from evil. You're one card away from evil. Let's see if you see a chancellor. 5 could be the chancellor. Sure can, bud. You say there's a pair. So you're saying 2, 3, and 6. There's an outcast, a minion, and a villager. Well, you're saying there's a pair of evil. Okay, so one of you got plague doctored, and the other one is evil, and there's no way to know which. Because you're lying, because the only place Ba can go is here or here, and neither is next to Chancellor. And you're lying because you're pointing at either 2 villagers and an outcast, or 3 villagers. So, we're in a 50-50, but it's fine because I've got all my hit points. Yeah, you're pointing at 2 known villagers and a hunter who could be a doppelganger. But either way, you're lying. You're lying and you're lying. The plague doctor got one of you. I'm going to kill this poet. There was Ba. And then you're a corrupted knitter. This game is so good. Oh, it's got a full house, man. We're rocking everybody. Everybody come to town. All right, I'm putting 2 yellows down, and I got 3 to play, and I've got Ba and a minion and a witch. So I've got 1 outcast between a doppelganger, plague doctor, and bombardier. There are 2 pairs of evil. That's only true if they're in a line of 3. There's a bombardier. Hunter is saying 2 away. Bard is saying no corrupted characters. The Bard is saying we don't have a plague doctor. That's what he's saying. Evil's not adjacent to each other, so we're hard disagreeing with the poet. There's a dreamer. I cured 2 corruptions. You could not have cured... If this is a plague doctor, at best you cured 1 corruption, you lying sack of crap. So... Oh, and I don't get to see you! Because of the witch. Yeah, he's lying. So, okay, you're the plague doctor. You shot this alchemist, making him into a liar. I don't have any duplicates on the board. Doesn't rule out the doppelganger, because this could be a duplicate. Okay. You're saying closest evil is this way. It is more likely that the alchemist is evil than number 9 is a plague doctor that shot him. That's more likely. And it's very unlikely that the evils are just in a row, one after the other, which is what would have to be the case for the poet to be telling the truth. So I like this hunter pointing at the poet. Yeah, look at this hunter. Look at this hunter. Because the poet and the knitter disagree with each other. You're saying they're not adjacent to each other. You're saying they're all adjacent to each other. You're pointing at both of them. They can't both be lying because of corruption, because we've only got one plague doctor max. Plague doctor couldn't shoot both of them. So the plague doctor could have corrupted one of them, in which case the other one's telling the truth. And then the hunter's lying. This triangle looks like it will sort itself out at some point, which I like. Okay. The only way the alchemist lives another day is if I convince myself that number 9 is a plague doctor. That's it. That's the only way he gets out of this. But the only ability I have is a dreamer. So, okay, you're a plague doctor and you shot the alchemist and he's just lying. That doesn't really tell us much of anything. Yeah, it does. If you're the plague doctor and you shot the alchemist, it tells us the bard is lying. And if you're the plague doctor and you shot the alchemist, the bard is making the hunter into a liar. We've got 3 minions to place. Well, 3 evils to place. So, okay, you shot the alchemist, or you shot the bard. In that case, you're evil. If you're corrupted and you're evil, the hunter's in the clear for now. In some cases, if the evils are different from each other, like Puka, the Chancellor, etc., have like actual abilities in the town, then the Dreamer could be useful. Because if the Dreamer points at someone that you suspect is, like, for example, being Puka, but you know can't be the Chancellor, the Dreamer could differentiate between the two. I don't know that I've seen a situation like that happen, but it is possible. What about this poet? Can we concoct a situation where there are evil, evil, evil right in a line? That's what would have to happen for this poet to be correct. So evil, evil, evil. If you're evil, you're lying. But then your lie is unaccounted for. And that's the only way you could be evil if this poet's lying, right? Because we can't go the other direction without getting the poet into the mix. Evil, evil, evil. Now you're telling the truth. You're telling the truth. We don't know anything about you. Your lie is accounted for. You're a dreamer anyway, so that works. If these 3 are evil, but then you're lying, and that only works if you've been shot by a plague doctor. But if this character is evil, you haven't been shot by a plague doctor, because there's no plague doctor. In fact, number 9 cannot be evil. Who are we missing in this deck? We are missing either a plague doctor or a doppelganger. Number 9 is either a plague doctor or a doppelganger or a villager that one of these other characters is keying off of as the doppelganger. This card can never be evil. I learned that. So we know you're good. Okay, so what about evil, evil, evil? In this case, your lie is accounted for. You're the dreamer, so who knows? Your lie is accounted for. You're saying no corrupted characters. Absolutely possible. You're saying 2 cards away from closest evil, which you would be. You're saying, don't look at me or I'm going to light it up, when we believe you. And then also, we believe you, and also we believe you. So evil, evil, evil could work. So there is a world where this poet knows what she's talking about. If evil, evil, evil. Does knowing that number 9 is good help me with anything? It tells me that if you're telling the truth, the poet's telling the truth, or the poet's good. Because this can't be evil. Okay. Can I easily create a world where the poet is correct, but the poet is lying, but the knitter is correct? Like, okay, you're a minion, you're evil. That accounts for your lie. We skip you. We skip you. You're evil, which means you're a plague doctor who shot someone. In fact, you'd be a plague doctor who shot you. And then you're fine, and then you're evil, which accounts for your lie. But then you're lying, and we don't have a way to account for your lie. Is that correct? Because we're saying you're lying. You're lying. You got shot. No, if you got shot, then you couldn't be evil. You're lying because you're evil. You're evil. You got shot. That accounts for your lie. And your lie is accounted for because this was a corrupted character. Then you're okay, and you're evil. No, you would be evil, but then you're lying, and we can't account for this lie. So we've ruled one knitter situation out. What if evil... It's the same thing no matter which one we start with. Evil, evil, shot, evil, but then you're lying, and you can't be. So if the knitter's telling the truth, we don't start here. We'd have to place 3 evils without being adjacent here. So you're evil. We have to skip you. So you got shot. But then your lie is unaccounted for. That's how we do it. You cannot possibly be telling the truth. Because there's no configuration of 3 evil cards that makes sense. We need to account for your lie. We can do that by making you evil. But then we have to skip you. And we have to skip you. Because if you were evil, evils would be adjacent. And if you were evil, then you'd be... You're the person whose veracity we're trying to discern. So you're evil. We have to go down here. You're evil. For you to be evil, there has to be a corrupted character. So we shoot you with this plague doctor. 2 cards within close evil becomes a lie because you're next to an evil. And then this poet is evil. So we're saying evil, evil, evil. But then this enlightened has an unaccounted for lie. I've walked through that twice, and I'm pretty convinced. This knitter must be lying. The evils are adjacent to each other. It's possible that the poet is wrong, and there's only one pair of evil. Like, we could do, like, evil, evil, and then evil somewhere else. Right? Like, you're evil, and you're evil, so we've got 1 pair. But then we skip you. Yeah, because evils are adjacent to each other. Oh, no, you're lying now. In this case, you have to be lying. So you got shot. So evil, 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 you get shot. So now we're split up the evils to make the poet a liar. But then we can't account for the poet's lie. Evil, evil, evil. You got shot, but we can't account for the poet's lie in that case either. So if you got shot, evil, evil. We can't account for... There's too many lies in that case. Have I also proven that the poet can't be lying? I see a world where we're evil across the board here. I'm not sure I see a world otherwise. You're lying. So let's do it from the other way. Evil. Evil. Then you're telling the truth. But we have to account for 2 lies, so you'd be evil, but then you can't get shot twice. I don't think it works. I think we got too many liars if we do that. I think you need to be telling the truth, you need to be telling the truth, you need to be telling the truth. If it's evil, 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 and this is a doppelganger, you're telling the truth because nobody got shot. You're telling the truth because you're shooting this knitter. You're telling the truth because there's a pair and a pair. You're telling the truth because you're closest to the alchemist. I think that's the only way it works. I can't figure out a way to split up these evils, either to fulfill the knitter or to fulfill a lying poet. I'm going to stab this alchemist. I'm going to see Ba. Then I'm going to stab... You know what? Let's just test the dreamer. Lying. I'm going to stab this dreamer. And now we know the knitter's lying. And there's the witch. And you were... an empress. Wait a minute. Oh my god, I solved that whole board under the assumption that we had 2 yellows, but we didn't. But I didn't know that, though. I couldn't have known that until I flipped that card. Yeah. We could have short-circuited a lot of assumptions. For some reason, I was thinking we had 2 yellows to place. We could have short-circuited a lot of assumptions by saying nobody got... If anybody got shot, the bombardier would have had to have been evil. Well, we got there in the end. All right. Oh boy, we got Puka and a puppeteer and 4 to place and a plague doctor kicking around. Hopefully we don't have a plague doctor in the map. There's a bombardier. It's looking good. Sure. Yeah, okay. We don't have a doppelganger in this map, so these are definitely minion pairs. A bard, an oracle, and a jester. So we've got a fortune teller and a jester to play with. I only see the bombardier. We're only placing 1 yellow, and the plague doctor can't disguise. So the bombardier is real, and we don't have a plague doctor. So we have 2 corrupted people sitting next to Puka. You're saying number 4 is evil. You're saying number 5 is a real medium. You're saying number 7's a real scout. So we have a pair of scouts and a pair of mediums. So our puppeteer and our minion have to be down here. And then Puka can be anywhere. About this jester. I got a fortune teller to look for some evils. And I got a jester to look for some evils. So I like my odds. If I have the jester look at the bombardier and both scouts... and he says 0 evils, we know he's Puka. If he says 1 evil, we know he's a truth-telling villager. If he says 2 evils... Ooh, no, if he says 1 or 2, he could be a truth-telling villager, but not necessarily. The fortune teller would be a better test, actually. Because we pick 2 characters. One of these characters has to be evil, and we know if she says... she'll only say true or false. If the jester's Puka, you're lying. The jester can't be Puka. If the jester is Puka, then this oracle's the only person corrupted, and the bard is... well, you could be evil, I guess. No, you can't. Because I've only got 2 minions to place, and they go down here. There's a minion in this pair. There's a minion in this pair. This cannot be Puka. If this Jester is Puka, she doesn't affect the Bombardier. The Oracle's lying. But then who's his Bard talking about? 2 cards away from a corrupted character. Puka's not corrupted. The Scout's not corrupted. Even if they're evil, they're not corrupted. So, and you can't be... If this is Puka, I can't have a minion to place here. So you can't be Puka. And I think that means... Well, you... Oh, that's actually useful. You can't be Puka. For the same reason. Okay. You're saying 4 or 9 is a minion? And yeah, I believe you, actually. Could you be Puka? Yes, you could be Puka. You could absolutely be Puka. Turning this Oracle into a liar. You're saying 4 is evil. You're saying this medium is evil. You're saying 5 is a real medium. This would be a Puka pair. A minion Puka pair. You're saying this is a minion. The minion's saying that Puka is a real medium. So, I think we point the fortune teller at the mediums and see if she's telling the truth. Evil true. So we know that's a true statement. One of these is a minion, at minimum. And it might be a minion Puka pair. You're saying 7's a real scout. You're saying Puka's 2 cards away from the closest evil. We have so much evil. There's 4 evil to place. You're saying minions 2 cards. Last time we had the situation where we were measuring Puka and from a minion, we were stuck for an hour and a half. You're saying 4 or 9 is a minion. And I'm tempted to believe you. Well, you can't be saying you're a minion yourself. That doesn't make any sense. But you could be saying 4 is a minion. So I've got you saying 4 is bad times. I've got you saying 4 is bad times. I've got 2 guaranteed good people. So we point this gesture at the Bombardier, the Fortune Teller, and this medium that everybody says is evil. If he says 0, that's bad. This doesn't give us much of anything. Well, it tells us that you're lying. And it tells us you're lying. Right? Because if I point here, here, and here, and you say 0 evil, then either the Jester's lying or these other 2 characters are lying. And if I can catch you in a lie, I know that you're Puka. Don't I? I do, because the minions are down here. Puka's got to be sitting next to a liar. But you can't be Puka either. If you're Puka and you're corrupted, then you're sitting 2 cards away from a Bard. But the Bard would also be corrupted, and the Bard's telling the truth. So Puka's sitting here corrupting these 2 characters. This Jester tells me some nonsense that I don't believe. That's fine. But the Bard is also lying. But the Bard is sitting 2 cards away from a corrupted character. You cannot, my friend, be Puka. You could be Puka. And you can't be Puka for the same reason. If you're Puka, you're corrupted, and that's fine. You're lying, and that's fine. And you're corrupted, but you're 2 cards away from a corrupted character. No, this doesn't hold. It holds up here because if you're Puka, you're corrupted, but now you're telling the truth about this, and that doesn't make sense. But down here, if you're Puka, you're corrupted, you're saying 2 cards with a corrupted character, but that could still be a lie if this is a Puka minion pair. This scout is not exonerated. You are not off the hook, sir. Okay, gesture. Pointing at Bombardier, Fortune Teller, and number 4 medium. Because the Fortune Teller and the Oracle... No, the Poet and the Oracle and the Fortune Teller all say that number 4 is... Well, the Poet and the Oracle for sure are saying number 4. The Jester can help us clear that. If the Jester says 0, the Jester cannot be lying. No matter what I do, this Jester is going to tell me the truth. Because he can't be Puka. We've ruled him out from being Puka. Yeah, because if he's Puka, corrupted and corrupted, then what's this bard talking about? The bard can't be a minion. But he also can't be corrupted because his bombardier is not Puka and neither is his oracle. This gesture can absolutely be trusted. There's one evil amongst the two guaranteed town characters and this medium. I trust him. We know that that's true. Let's not mark it until we see the body. There's the body. Now I trust you. 4 is evil. I trust you. 4 or 9 is a minion. I trust you. Okay. You could be Puka. You could be Puka. You could be Puka. We got lots of truth on this side of the board. You're 2 away from a corrupted character. So you're saying this scout is lying. This cannot be true. How could this be true? The jester's not corrupted. Can the scout be corrupted? No, because the scout's saying the minion is 2 cards away from closest evil. For that to be a lie, oh, this could be Puka, and then you're corrupted, and then you're telling the truth. That's how we're going to untangle this. We got to look. We had to look at this carefully. I'm 2 cards away from a corrupted character. You're saying you're corrupted, which means you're lying. I got a puppeteer to place too, by the way. Okay, so you could be like a puppet or something. Minions 2 cards away from closest evil. If you're the puppet, that could be true. But then I've still got a puppeteer and Puka to play. I got 3 to place in 4 spots. Like I like my odds a lot, and you can't be Puka. Yeah, my odds are good. Can you both be lying? If you're Puka, that's your lie, and that's your lie. Then puppeteer puppet, but then you're telling the truth. No, you're not. He's not corrupt. So you're Puka, you're the puppeteer, you're the puppet. The minion is 2 cards closest away, but then you're lying, and that's unaccounted for. Puka, puppeteer. In that, so you're Puka. You can't be Puka because we know you're telling the truth. You're not Puka. We've got Puka narrowed down to 2 spots now. So you're Puka. You're corrupted. Your lie's accounted for. Puka's 2 cards away from the closest evil. That's going to be a lie. I could do puppeteer puppet. The puppet could be up here. You could be a puppet. So, okay, Puka. Puppeteer to make you a liar. That accounts for your lie. You're the puppet. You're telling the truth. Then you're lying, and that's unaccounted for. And you're lying, and that's unaccounted for. So that's not going to work. What if you're Puka? You can't be Puka. What if you're Puka? If you're Puka, you're lying, and that's accounted for being next to Puka. But then you're lying. We could make you the puppeteer. So Puka, you're accounted for. And then you're... It's okay. Puka, corrupted. Puppeteer, puppet. That works. I think you've got to be Puka. Puka, corrupt. Puppeteer, puppet works. And then we got all of them in a line again. Puka, corrupt, puppeteer, puppet. That works. Do you work as Puka? Have I ruled that out? Then you're both corrupt. Puka needs to be adjacent to someone. So Puka, puppeteer, puppet. That could work. Either way, the scout's evil. If you're Puka, this is not a real scout. And the only other... If you're not Puka, you're... Either way, the scout is bad. You're a puppeteer. Which means the medium's Puka. Which means... You're lying. The minion is one card away from closest evil. You're telling the truth. You're 2 cards away from someone who's been corrupted, so you're the puppet. All right, let's get one more village under my belt today. And then I got to go cook my dinner. We've got Minion and Lilith to place. There's a Doppelganger and a Bombardier in the deck. We're only placing 1 outcast. We've got no sources of corruption. There's a Jester. There's a Knight. If I've got no sources of corruption, you're safe to try to kill. Sorry, bud. I mean, sometimes you just get one. You're saying 8 is good. I want to see who 8 is before Lilith kills them. I cured 0 corruptions. I believe you. If I believe you, then I believe you. This one's going to go pretty quick, I think. There's another Knight. I can test you. You're good. 2 or 3 is a minion. I believe you. And there's the Bombardier. Okay, so we don't have a Doppelganger. I don't know what you are. It's either the Jester or the Bomb. Like, this could be a fake Bombardier. Or this could be a fake Bombardier. Like, one of the... No, you can't be a fake Bombardier. You'd have to be a real Bombardier. You could be a fake Bombardier. Well, let's test this Jester against 3 known good characters. There's 0 evils. That's a lie. You're a liar. Sometimes you go through them quick. And sometimes you're stuck for an hour and a half. And you just don't know what you're going to get. All right, that's going to have to do it for me today, guys. I only got to stream for a couple hours today, but I had so much other stuff I needed to do. Thanks so much for watching. I don't know how much more of this I'm going to play on stream. I'm, like, super addicted to it. And I feel like I could just do it for hours and hours. Like, we'll just have to see how it goes. Thanks so much for watching. Peace out. Sleep well.